Hi, I'm Stephen Cox with the Real North Idaho Show. I'm here at Cup of Columbia Coffee to interview Dan Wilson. He's a candidate for Sheriff of Kootenai County. Come on in and let's talk to Dan. Can you introduce yourself and tell me why you want to run for Sheriff of Kootenai County?
Yeah, my name is Dan Wilson, and the reason I'm running for Kootenai County Sheriff is because I don't believe that we currently have a sheriff that has a vision to prepare this county for what's coming, the inevitable. And I think that from an administrative standpoint, things are not well in the sheriff's office, so it's a combination of many things.
Why did you decide to change from a Republican to an independent?
Well, in Idaho, we are heavily controlled up in North Idaho here in Kootenai County by the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee. And I've been a Republican my entire life. I was canvassing for candidates before I was old enough to drive, was a young Republican board member in my teens and early 20s. But it came down to this. When I made my announcement that I was running, I had people from the KCRCC sent to me telling me, don't run against Bob, we don't want him replaced. And I continued. I put in my questionnaire that all candidates receive. And while I was actively campaigning in the very early days, I had members of the vetting committee that were publicly campaigning against me, and these are the vetting members that are supposed to give their recommendations as to who they want to support for the primary candidate. So after attending a final interview meeting where one of the board members of this vetting committee was being so extremely hostile to me inside that meeting, calling me a liar and other things, I just finally said, obviously this is not going to be an unbiased vetting process, so I decided to withdraw as a Republican and become unaffiliated and run as an independent. My message is still the same as it has always been, but the more that I have met with people across this entire county, I've realized that the sheriff really should be a nonpartisan position anyway.
So you can support both sides.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to law enforcement, we're supposed to be impartial, equal protection under the law. And in the words of John Locke, everybody has the right to life, liberty, and property. We're all equal under God, equally created. When I was a police officer, when I was dispatched to some call, a call for service, I then arrive at on scene asking people a bunch of prerequisite questions. I provided them with the exact same service regardless of what their background or ideology was, and really the sheriff has to be the same.
Right, I agree with that.
And the current sheriff will continually provide services from the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office and raffle them off at Republican fundraisers that then those funds go back to supporting him, and I think that it's wrong, it's also unlawful to use county resources as a Republican sheriff or a Democrat sheriff. If you're not going to do it for every political affiliation, you shouldn't be doing that. I think there's way too much partisanship right now in the sheriff's office.
I read that you 2 terms and done.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I believe that politicians in general, after you serve a while, you become disconnected from the people. I think there's way too much of an ability by every person that is running and in office to eventually become corrupted by the process. I believe that George Washington set the limit for us when he said, when they attempted to make him president for life, no, it's now time for other people to come in. We are a representative republic, and I've just seen too much abuse of politicians that don't know when or refuse to let go.
Right, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Term limits.
Yes, term limits is a good thing.
Yes, they are. What does it mean to be a constitutional sheriff?
Well, to be a constitutional sheriff is, in my belief, is somebody who has studied the history of this country, understands everything from the beginning when the Pilgrims landed here and we had our first form of government, the Mayflower Compact, and then the history of the early colonies and the Americans all the way through the French Indian War, and after the French Indian War, when the Americans decided it's time for us to be Americans. We're no longer subject to Britain. Through the Declaration of Independence, the War of Independence, the winning of that war, and then the struggle to find out what kind of national government and alliance should we have. When you read the founders and their intents of why they framed the Constitution the way they did as a representative republic, when they came back and said we have to add a Bill of Rights because we're getting so much opposition by states like Virginia that said you've just created another government that will eventually usurp the rights of man. When you read through the words of Hamilton and Jay and Madison in books like the Federalist Papers, you understand what the entire intent of this form of government is, and more specifically, our constitutional republic. A sheriff is the first and last line of defense for the people at the county level. This has already been ruled on by the Supreme Court in the 90s. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer, and he alone has supremacy in the county. So to be that individual that stands between an out-of-control, unaccountable federal and state government to protect people's constitutional rights, you probably want a man who has read from the mouth of those that framed the documents and understood what the struggle is. Why is the First Amendment so important? Why are the 5 prongs of the First Amendment so important to Americans? Why is the Second Amendment there? Why is the Fourth Amendment so important as far as to be secure in your person, places, and effect? And so I believe that a constitutional sheriff isn't somebody that just says, well, I'm pro Second Amendment and I'm not going to make you wear a mask and I won't enforce the red flag laws. A true constitutional sheriff understands the entirety of what it means to be an American.
So I've read a lot about them wanting to use license plate readers and kind of making Coeur d'Alene a smart city. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm anti-smart city, period. That's global communism. There's an attempt around COVID to do away with the Bill of Rights. We have become far too accustomed, especially after 9/11, to buying into this idea that the government has to protect us from each and every event that takes place. And along with that comes a continual invasion of our First Amendment rights, our Fourth Amendment rights, and so on. License plate readers today are not the same that they were 10 years ago. When I was actively using a automatic license plate reader and that technology 15 years ago, that technology was pretty benign. We used it on a couple patrol cars to search out for mostly stolen vehicles. Today, that technology is on steroids. The third parties that use and that implement this software that law enforcement uses sells data. So when I was in my car, patrol car, running a plate in my computer, I ran that plate, it went directly to a national database or a state database, and then that query was logged as to when it was run, by who, and what my purpose was. Today, we have seen that this new technology can track thousands of plates per hour. It geolocates where vehicles are and it sells that data abroad for commercial and law enforcement usage. And it's just not secure. We don't need to be tracked. Part of the new software aligns with AI, so it can predict even where you might be. Let's say that your vehicle was involved in some kind of an event and they're looking for you. With the technology they have today, using these readers, they can predict where, because of your patterns, where to find you at certain times of days. I believe that it's dangerous as Americans when we decide to trade our dangerous liberty for this certain security. This idea that the government can be securing us at all times and all places, with the sell being that we give part of our autonomy away and part of our free movement away, is dangerous. California, last year, there was 9 agencies that had data breaches. So there's a whole host of reasons not to be in love with the technology. And I love the fact that you brought in smart cities, because people don't realize that all this is converging to an eventual end, which is you will be confined to certain places and every movement will be controlled, where you can buy, how much you can buy, what method you can buy things with. And as Americans, we reject that.
Yeah, I reject that. Yeah. I don't like to be watched and controlled.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And I don't trade my liberty. I accept risk. As Americans, we have forgotten that we accept a certain amount of risk. When I think about the pioneers that came across the Oregon Trail, they understood the risk, but the reward was their liberty. And we have gotten far too in love with government and not in love with our rights to be free, to enjoy our liberty without compromise.
What do you think about the influx of people into North Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County?
I understand why people are coming. I mean, this is the greatest county in the greatest state in the greatest country. People naturally, especially after COVID, are drawn to those places where people can be free. But unfortunately, along with that comes some of the politics and some of the behaviors and the culture from the states that people are fleeing from. So it's always a balance between understanding people's rights to move here into this great location, but also combating it at a social level, saying, hey, we aren't for big government, so we have to keep this culture in check.
I think the influx of people is good, but it has some, we need to figure it out.
Many of my town halls that I've had for the past 10 months, when I ask for a show of hands, I would say that less than 25% consistently are natives to Idaho. The majority have moved here within the past 5 years. So I was here in the 90s when we had a first influx of California immigration into Idaho. It was far different times back then. Those people, though, were moving in, were not here because of freedom. They were here because of opportunity. But the folks that I see now moving into this area are people that I align with very well, and I understand why they have fled those communist states for Idaho.
They're political refugees.
They are. And that's what's great about our country is you can relocate wherever you want to.
And a lot of people don't realize, that like 90% of California is rural.
Yes, that is very true.
That's one thing that I fear about what could happen in Idaho. It's not the people coming to North Idaho I'm worried about. It's the cities, the city.
Yeah. And that's why it's up to local government, to govern the way the consent of the people want it.
Right.
If we want to put restrictions on development, then we do that. But it's balanced by people's rights to do what they want with their own property.
What are you going to do to curb federal law enforcement overreach?
Well, as the sheriff, I have the sole ability to put the federal government, federal law enforcement specifically, in check in the county. What needs to be done is we're seeing a weaponization of the DOJ, the FBI, Homeland Security against all political opponents, and this simply cannot stand. When you have the FBI infiltrating traditional Catholic churches, when you have them going after parents who are righteously standing up against their local school boards, when you have people that are praying near abortion clinics, and you're sending SWAT teams into, arrest these violators in early mornings in front of their families, things are out of control. Whether it's the January 6th event, whether it's the Governor Whitmer, where you have 12 of the 20 actors in that kidnap plot being federal agents and or confidential human sources, things are out of control. As a sheriff, the very first thing that I will be doing is telling every federal law enforcement agency that is working in the county what the rules of engagement will be and what the violation outcome will be if one citizen and their rights are violated by any federal law enforcement, they will be removed from the county.
Nice. I like that. What are your thoughts on the Second Amendment, and how do you plan on upholding our Second Amendment in government if the government wants to take that right away?
Well, the Second Amendment really protects all the other 9 amendments of the original Bill of Rights. You can't have the First Amendment if you don't have the right to physically protect yourself against a government that will try to come in and take your rights away. And the founders were very, very intelligent when they wrote the Second Amendment. It's very clear to understand, shall not be infringed, the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The people's right to be armed is not about hunting. It's not even about self-defense so much as it is to keep an out-of-control government at check. So I don't think that there should be any restrictions on firearms, period. I think that if you want to have a short-barreled rifle, you should be able to have a short-barreled rifle without having to have a tax stamp on it, without having to have the ATF give their blessing. Same thing with suppressors and any other light arms. The thing that concerns me is anytime that we take one of the Bill of Rights, in this case the Second Amendment, and try to put it on a pedestal above any of the other, I think that is a unfortunate viewpoint, because we should be adamantly protecting all of the Bill of Rights with as much enthusiasm and determination as we do the second. As far as the federal government coming in to take firearms away, if that were to happen, we would use whatever means necessary to prohibit that. I believe that what they're going to do is kind of similar. When I was a kid, I was told that no nation would ever dare try to invade the United States because we are the most heavily armed population in the world. And I think half those gun owners live in North Idaho. So nobody would ever come and attack us. But they didn't really have to do that. All they had to do was introduce a virus and a little propaganda, and men traded their, again, dangerous liberty for a certain security. In the same way, I think that what they're going to do is they're not going to try to come in en masse take firearms. I believe that they're going to make restrictions on ammunition and accessories. They're going to make it impossible to have gunpowder. You're not going to be able to reload your own ammunition. So I think that they're smarter than trying to do a direct invasion of the county to take rights away. However, if that were to occur, we would deputize whoever we needed to in order to maintain the rule of law.
How do you plan to fight the drug epidemic?
Yeah. Well, trying to stop the flow of drugs into Kootenai County is impossible. The southern border is wide open, and we are seeing a resurgence right now of cocaine, meth, but we're being hands down beat by fentanyl. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death for, I think it's people between 18 and 45. 100,000 deaths last year alone. Washington State next door leads the nation, but it's coming over at an industrial scale because China sends the ingredients to the Mexican cartels. The Mexican cartels are making the fentanyl, and then they're carting it through human trafficking all the way up through the continental United States. The best thing that we can do right now, besides trying to do interdictions locally when it's being transported, is we have to educate. And the education can't come at the hands of the government. The government's inept at being able to efficiently do that. I've been meeting with local groups, not only fentanyl survivor groups where loved ones have passed away, but also from recovery groups. And my message is strong with each one of these and consistent. It's up to these individual groups to come together and to start educating en masse all of the county. Your loved ones, those in your sphere of influence, because the only way we're going to live through this right now is through getting people not to indulge in it in the first place. And it's coming, look, disguised in other drugs. So it's not just I'm taking a fentanyl pill. Kids are finding it in candies. The stories of survivors that I have heard who lost loved ones due to these overdoses is heartbreaking. And then you add in now tranq, which they're mixing in with fentanyl, and that's the zombie drug where you see people walking around like they are the living dead with flesh rotting, sores on their body. So until we close that southern border, as Congress and the President are supposed to do Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, the best we can do is triage it.
Do you think it's better to lock them up or get them in rehab, meaning addicts?
Rehab. But it's a delicate dance because on one hand, you don't want to take first-time offenders and lock them up into the prison system. That does nobody any good. But we also have to have the resources there to help with the rehabilitation. Now I've heard that funding's an issue, but if I'm going to be frank with everyone, insisting that government always take care of this is also the wrong answer. The public has to start having buy-in, and they have to start supporting organizations that are providing intervention and rehab. But there was a bill that was passed earlier this year in Idaho, which dealt heavily with those found trafficking in fentanyl, specifically with harsh, sentences. And I understand the intent of it, but I was concerned about some of the language in it as well, because it could inadvertently take our kids or a family member that's not transporting fentanyl for purpose of resale, but they're in possession of it, and the consequences for being found guilty of trafficking those amounts could be pretty devastating. So yeah, locking people up of first or second offenses is not a good idea. After intervention, if they still continue though, then we obviously have to do something. And incarceration and forced rehabilitation is about the only step we have.
Where do you stand on human trafficking?
Well, unlike our current sheriff who continually states that he sees no evidence of human trafficking taking place in Kootenai County, I reject that. Human trafficking is taking place at an industrial scale across the entire country, billions of dollars of criminal enterprise. We have it in Kootenai County. I'm contacted all the time by rescue groups that are telling me the stories of the women and the children that are being trafficked here locally in our own communities. Not to say anything about those that are being smuggled in by the cartels and used as human slave labor or sex trafficking. And so my question is, why are we not finding it right here in Kootenai County? We had an opportunity, the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, to join and bring in some detectives to help work the internet crimes against children. And the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office has refused to do that. I've talked with firsthand organizations that have presented evidence of human trafficking to the current sheriff, and his response is, I don't want to touch that, well, I'm not going to touch it until after the election. We aren't finding human trafficking here in Kootenai County because we're not looking. And why are we not looking? Because we're worried who we're going to find in the net. So my answer is, if we can't try to protect the most vulnerable amongst us, those that are enslaved, who are we as Americans? And when I'm sheriff, I will be dedicating full-time detectives, and I'll be joining task force in order to help eradicate whatever we can out of this community.
What does it mean to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic?
Well, you have to look at it from the original vantage point, which is law enforcement. We've always dealt with domestic issues. Those that are trying to rob, kill, assault, those domestic relations. You always have criminals in your community. And that's why law enforcement locally is there to protect people's rights to life, liberty, and property. When it comes to foreign threats, that oath is ever evolving. We are now looking at invaders that have come from out of this country that are here operating as polystability agents, these military-aged males from Africa and the Middle East and China and South America. So as a sheriff, it's very likely that we will be presented with these criminal gangs that are here to destabilize our local county and to strike fear into our citizens. So for me, when that event takes place, we will be deputizing whoever we need to in order to help secure our county. My wife Donna and I went down to the unsecure Arizona border back in January, and I saw firsthand, 10 miles south of the Sassabee crossing below the Tucson sector, hundreds of military-aged males that were coming across our border where the United States government had cut the fence out and stacked it on the United States side. And we saw the non-governmental organization camps that were there that were helping aid these invaders that are coming across our border. But that was just one day. We saw hundreds of them. No border patrol, no National Guard, no law enforcement. And they are coming here for nefarious reasons, and it is not for asylum. I've come to the conclusion that from a national standpoint, we're in a lot of trouble. What is going to be. But I'm more concerned right here at the county level, because in order to secure us in our own community, we have to band together shoulder to shoulder in this cause to secure us and to maintain the rule of law. We can't fix what happens at the national level. We can't fix really anything at the state level, but we sure can unite and secure our own county.
Yeah. What does the real North Idaho mean to you?
Real North Idaho is one of freedom. It's liberty without compromise. It is the ability to own your own property, to live where you want to be able to live in safety, to be able to have your family around you and your friends, to be able to enjoy the hobbies and the things that you're passionate about. It's about simple life. It's about being away from big government. It's being able to open carry, if you so choose, in your community. It's neighbor helping neighbor. It's hardworking people. I mean, this region was made up of miners and loggers and mill workers and tradesmen. It's just a wonderful place. We have beautiful scenery. We have the greatest hunting around, the fishing, the boating, the outdoor activities. But more importantly, it's a secure place for now.
If you're not working, what are you out doing to enjoy North Idaho?
Well, every chance I get, my wife and I take walks. We we've been campaigning for 10 months, but prior to that, we get on our side-by-side, we take rides. I like to drink whiskey and smoke cigars, so we never pass up an opportunity to do that, visit with our neighbors, shoot, do a little hiking, but yeah, that's primarily what I do these days.
If you had to choose, which season is your favorite? Summer, winter, fall, spring?
Fall.
Fall?
Yeah, perfect temperature, still warm days and cool nights, and the fall colors I love.
Is there anything you want to say in closing?
I know that we're going through hard times right now, and we'll be facing even greater challenges in the weeks, months, and years to come. But I want people to remain hopeful, and I want people to remember that as Americans, we did not descend from fearful men. We descended from men who understood the times. They acted accordingly. They dedicated their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And that tradition has been passed on generation to generation. And right now, in our generation, we're facing many similar challenges. An out-of-control government, threats from foreign entities. But don't lose hope. Don't be discouraged. We now have the opportunity here to rise up to the occasion. My wife and I, when we're sitting down in our study, I look up at a famous painting of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and I ask myself often, am I worthy enough to be in the presence of those great men because of dedicating my life, my fortune, and my honor? So people, you have the right here in Kootenai County and in the region, to also take your solemn honor, your sacred honor, and to do the right thing for your community, and to be that difference, and to maintain liberty, to keep it at all costs, joining with your neighbors shoulder to shoulder for this cause of liberty. It doesn't matter if you have an ideation that is far different from those that are on the right versus the left. If you're an American, you're part of that equation. So I want people to remain strong and of good courage, and I just want God to bless not only our country, but I ask Him to bless the citizens of Kootenai County right here.
Thanks for meeting with me today and letting us understand your views.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir.
Yeah.
God bless you.
God bless you too.